Okay, well, I know it's a little dark in here, probably all for the better, and not my usual background. Not that that matters much, but I'm finally getting around this Sunday evening to talking to you all about a few figures that I've been wanting to sort of emphasize as some of the great religious thinkers in Jewish history. This is far from an exhaustive list, of course, but here are some of the people that you cannot take this course without knowing about. So take nice notes. This is good final exam type stuff. The first would have to be Rabbi Akiva, or Akiva, Akiva, we'll spell it with a V, Rabbi Akiva, who lived in the late first and into the second century of the Christian era. In fact, I believe raised somewhere sort of not far from Galilee. But here's what Akiva became known for. The story goes that he was a pretty simple guy, farmer, worked the land, man of the soil, and his wife was the one who strongly encouraged him to go into study and kind of pushed him, and he was quite open about acknowledging the role that she had in his life, and his becoming a great teacher of the Jewish tradition. Now, this is fairly early. The temple was destroyed in the year 70. He was born within that next generation. And the rabbinic tradition basically was just kind of getting back onto its feet, I should say, after the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple. I think we've talked a little bit about the fact that what the New Testament calls Pharisees really were the predecessors, we could say the spiritual and intellectual ancestors of rabbis. And the rabbi means teacher, of course. And there is no higher honor, certainly in Judaism since that time, than the title of rabbi. Prophet would have given it a run for its money at some point, but in many ways the rabbinic tradition eclipsed, and now this is going to depend on your point of view, but say from the Jewish tradition's perspective, the prophetic role was eclipsed by the role of the rabbi, the teacher, especially the teacher in debate, argument with other rabbis and learned people over the meaning and application of Scripture and or other people's commentaries on Scripture. I've talked to you about that this was kind of what the Talmud represents, and so you've learned about that. So Akiva became very well known as an extremely creative interpreter and teacher of the laws of Moses, such that there's a wonderful story that you must know. It's kind of at the heart of the Jewish tradition. And according to this story that is found in the Talmud, Moses heard about this fella Akiva down on earth, and how great a teacher he was, and he was an expounder of the laws of Moses. And so Moses requested, a incognito look at this guy, Akiva. So according to the story, in fact, Moses was granted his request that was made known to God. And here's Moses standing back in the corner of the shul, the school, the classroom, and this guy is up here just weaving all kinds of arguments and finding hidden meanings and in terms and sentences that Moses is like his mind's blown by what this guy's coming up with, and he keeps thinking, man, I did not have that in mind at all. And but Moses is very impressed. Oh my goodness. And so upon his return to heaven, Moses said, great master, the God, by the way, in the Talmud is basically God is the super rabbi, the great master of the Torah, of course, the giver of the Torah, And so anyway, Akiva or Moses asked God, where did this guy get all of these creative interpretations and meanings in the sentences that it was not in my mind. None of this was really in my intention. And the text says that God said to Moses, "Be silent, for this is what I decree." Now, that's kind of ambivalent. What does that mean? Apparently it means I've decreed that this Rabbi Akiva would find all of these great hidden meanings in your words, Moses. That's my decree. Well, then Moses, astounded by all this, says, "Oh, Lord, how marvelous this man is. What must be the end result of such a life as this? What blessing he might apparently would receive." And remember that, the book of Deuteronomy is part of the Torah attributed to Moses, and Deuteronomy is filled with both promises and threats. Promises to those who, study the Torah and obey it, put it into practice, because long will be their lives and the lives of their descendants in the land that God had given them. So Moses wants to know how's this guy's life going to turn out? So Moses is granted an answer to his question. Now, here's the thing with Akiva, in order to appreciate this answer. Akiva did okay trying to sort of circumvent Roman authority. Remember, the same Romans who occupied the land in Jesus' time and who were ultimately responsible for Jesus' execution on a Roman stake. It's the same Romans. They're still there. In fact, after Jesus' time, Jerusalem is destroyed. The temple is absolutely demolished. Things that have not gone well. Right? Now, there's Jewish uprisings here and there. Undoubtedly, the Romans were a little fearful that Jesus might inspire such an uprising. So, but, nothing real major until around the year 120, somewhere in the 120s, a man named Simon Bar Kokhba, Bar means son of, and his dad's name was Kokhba, Kochkba, Kokhba, Kochba. So we usually just call him Bar Kokhba, but he was a guy, he was a military strategist. He won some early skirmishes with Rome and kind of excited the people about the possibility that he might actually be able to lead the Jewish people into a successful rebellion after, the horrors of 60 years earlier in AD 70. And it's interesting. Akiva got on board. He got on board with this guy and kind of supported him as a potential Messiah. Remember, Messiah means anointed one, and what most Jews expected of somebody anointed by God was somebody that would, get rid of the Romans once and for all, or whatever Gentiles happen to be sticking their feet on our necks. In this case, Rome. Jesus had not delivered on that, of course, nor had he ever said that he would. But now here's somebody, Bar Kokhba, who has every intention of going after Rome. And Akiva gives him his support. And of course, the Bar Kokhba rebellion is put down pretty quickly. It's during this time that there's a last remaining holdout of Jews on Masada. Some of you have heard of Masada, this beautiful kind of summer retreat fortress that Solomon had built. Not Solomon. Herod had built out east of Jerusalem, up in the mountains, and that was the Jews' last stand, was up on Masada for this particular rebellion. Well, so Akiva lost some cred on that one, that he had backed this guy. This is actually a very significant moment in Jewish history where the rabbinic tradition kind of really did a strong turn away from any nationalistic or messianic hopes that somebody was going to come along as a military deliverer. I'm sure there were occasional ones, but this was the last big one, and Akiva's name is associated with it. It doesn't really tarnish his name too much at all. In fact, that now leads us to the rest of the story with Moses. Well, Akiva survived this rebellion, and he did get arrested, and he was under house arrest for a while. They would allow him to see some of his disciples and so on, but as time went on, and Rome got more and more kind of locked down on the Jewish people, there was a strict prohibition of teaching the Torah, the laws of Moses, the Jewish tradition, to students. And the general in the area, the Roman general by the name of Rufus, knew Akiva, and we'll call them good acquaintances. I doubt if we could call them friends. But Rufus definitely had a lot of respect for Akiva. But the fact is, Rabbi Akiva would not stop inviting students to his residence, whether he was in jail or not, wherever he was at the time, and teaching. And, they kind of turned a blind eye for a while, but finally, Rufus says, enough is enough. You have disobeyed the Roman edict far too many times. And Akiva was sentenced to death. Now, the death that he suffered was horrid. One of the methods of execution, along with crucifixes, was to take like a big old rake. I think kind of a heavy rake, like you have those light kind of rakes. Then you have the really heavy tonged rakes that in this case I think were used primarily for raking up dung and stuff like this. Anyway, heavy rakes. A particularly nasty way of executing somebody would be to put one of those rakes into coals, hot coals, in a fire, get those tongs really, really hot, have the person, hey, that's Coco. I know it's a rough story, but come on. Have this person staked down, face down to the ground, and then just take that rake and basically splay it across or down the victim's back. So it's hot, it's cutting, it's slicing up the skin. This is what Moses saw when he requested, what is the end of such a man as this? He saw Akiva's skin being flayed off his back in great agony. And Moses, not surprisingly, returns to God and says, Why? Why, O Lord, such an end? And again, the same reply, be silent, for such is my decree. We'll come back to that in a minute. So, according to the Talmud, as he's being just executed in this slow, excruciating way, General Rufus is there, and suddenly the sun is going down, and Akiva begins to recite the Shema, Deuteronomy 6, beginning at verse 6. Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God, the Lord is one, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and all your mind and strength. And Akiva's reciting this because it is the sundown prayer. After all, the sun's going down. And Rufus says, even now you would pray? And Akiva says, all my life. According to the Talmud, I don't know how easy it would be for him to say these things. All my life I have prayed and longed for the moment when I could recite these words and recite them from my heart. For I am loving God with all my heart and soul and strength. As his life is ebbing out of him, he emphasizes the word one. The Lord your God, the Lord is one. And dies really with that on his breath, and has given his life to this horrid Roman execution. Now I want to go back to Moses, who, there's two interpretations that I know of for God's response to Moses, who's scratching his head over such a horrible ending for Rabbi Akiva. and God says, "Be silent, for this is my decree." The hardline interpretation is, "This is what I desired. This is what I willed. I've decreed that Akiva should die in this way and bring me honor in this way." Okay, well, that's one. Then there's the, I would say the more, let's use a word like kinder, perhaps more liberal, progressive reading of this, and one that I would sway toward, is that God says, "Be silent, for this is my decree," and the decree is that I, God, have gifted to human beings the power of freedom to do with their lives, with their bodies, with their beings, what they choose. They will be held accountable, but it is my decree that they have this freedom. So in that regard, it's a little, it's not like, yeah, I willed that Akiva would meet this horrific ending, but rather I have willed that there be a world in which human beings can exercise their freedom in even these terrible ways, as we see with Rabbi Akiva. So he died somewhere around the year 130, just deeply beloved still, probably the most highly regarded rabbi, well, certainly from the first 500, and I'd say even 1,000 years, a really singular character, Rabbi Akiva.